Hi, hi, I'm Steve Adler. You got a minute? All right, we're going to go through some numbers today on the virus. I was on C-SPAN today, so we're going to talk about that just a little bit. I had a conversation with the president-elect and the vice president-elect, and I'll talk about that conversation. Wrote a letter to the Trump administration today, or yesterday actually. Seemed to work today. We'll touch base on my intervention with the Trump administration, and then I'll let you all go. All right, so let's begin with the numbers. The first number we want to talk about, first dashboard up, the number of hospitalizations that we have today on that first dashboard, 37. That's new admissions today. Numbers up a little from yesterday, but look at the 7-day moving average. It's 35. Yesterday it had gotten down to 33. So in the last few days, you can see the graph in the middle. We're kind of bouncing around in that mid-30 range. Number of new cases today, look on the right-hand side, up to 318. The concern is, as those numbers go up of new cases, eventually we see it result in new admissions. We see that eventually result in new ICUs, and that's when we get overwhelmed. 318 is above our 7-day moving average of 284. It's not as high as one number that we got last week, but it's the second highest number we have gotten in the last 7 days. So that's why we went to the orange rate. We need people to stay on top of this. We don't want to get in the place where we're having to consider shutting stuff down. We want to keep our schools open. And if everybody just a little bit more vigilant, a little bit more diligent, wearing their masks, and I'm beginning to see that out on the streets. People out in public wearing masks just because. This includes around family and around friends. We're more inclined to take our masks off if we're around people, families and friends, not in our household, just families and friends, because we figure they can't be carrying the virus, but they do. All right, let's take a look at the hospitalization numbers, and we can compare what we're seeing in our hospitals to the 7-day moving averages. We have 219 people in our hospitals tonight. The 7-day moving average was 208. So again, our hospitalizations continue to be above our 7-day moving average, which continues to rise. In our ICUs today, we have 72, which is about our 7-day moving average of 71. Ventilators, 46 people tonight on ventilators. 41 is our 7-day moving average. So we have slowed the increase in those numbers, but they're still increasing, and that's the concern. The concern, of course, is not that somebody hospitalized or everybody that gets this is going to die, because as we know, not a lot of people who get this virus pass away. But what we do know is people who get this virus end up in our hospitals. And if too many people get it and too many people end up in our hospitals, then if you have a heart attack or an automobile accident, there's not going to be a room for you in the emergency room. That's what we're trying to guard against as we keep our city moving forward. I keep reading the social media that says we shouldn't be worried about this because so few people die of it. The people that do that on social media are just missing the point altogether. Fortunately, most of us are not, and we're doing the work necessary to keep the community safe. We take the 318 new cases, that gets us up to almost 37,000. Number of people passed away remain constant from yesterday, so no new people passing away. Those are the important numbers for us to have, still increasing, but we're slowing the curve down. People have to remain vigilant, especially with Thanksgiving coming up here. Today, I was told you I was on C-SPAN. I had the opportunity, the president-elect and the vice president-elect asked for the opportunity to talk to me. Of course, you do that. And yeah, I wasn't alone. I was with 40, 50 other mayors. But I appreciated the opportunity to get a chance to talk to them. You can see me. I'm in the 7th column all the way to the right, 4 people down. That's my box right there, has my name on there. Just wanted to let you know that I was part of that. It was actually really nice to have that opportunity to speak to the president-elect and the vice president-elect as well. It was a bipartisan call. It was both Republican and Democrat mayors. The vice president-elect, and you can leave that screen now. We don't have to have people squinting trying to find me. The bipartisan group, as the governor's talking about, as the president-elect is still talking, as he has been consistently, about finding things that we can do together in a bipartisan way. He talked about how city and federal leaders could work together. He pledged to work with mayors, and we're talking with somebody in President-elect Biden who actually served in local government. He was on his city council before he ran for United States Senator, had a couple terms on the city council, pledged to work with mayors. He knows what it means to be at the front line as elected officials are in our local governments. He made real clear his intention to improve coordination with cities, and we're all real appreciative of that. We talked about expanding testing and preparing for the distribution of the vaccines, talked about making sure that schools can open safely. Spent a fair amount of time talking to him about securing economic relief for individuals, for businesses, and for cities. He promised relief coming directly to cities, which is important. We talked with him and the vice president-elect about the potential tsunami of evictions that happens when eviction controls go away, so the need for unemployment benefits and rental relief. But we also talked about a lot of the businesses that are hitting real hard. We're talking here about restaurants and bars, hospitality industry, as a real focus of where the federal government needs to come in. Those are businesses that were hit really hard at the beginning. They're still being hit hard. They're the hardest to open because their whole business model is built around physical interactions with people. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. Also talked about addressing income inequality, systemic racism, fairness, equity in systems. We talked about acting on climate change and how on the day he gets elected, he's going to initiate us getting back into the Paris Accords. We talked about infrastructure. We talked about the bipartisan support that would come from doing the infrastructure bill. Remember when President Trump got elected, that was going to be one of the first big priorities. It was a huge national infrastructure bill, as big as anything that we've seen since Eisenhower did the United States highway system. I think we have a real chance of getting that done now. I think it's going to have bipartisan support. It would mean a lot for jobs. In my conversations with the White House, the new intergovernmental relations person in the White House, I talk generally about 4 areas. I talk about virus relief, direct access to cities, the unemployment assistance, the eviction assistance, but the emphasis on restaurants, bars, and hospitalities. I talk about infrastructure, how that's going to help with jobs. I also talk about what we just did with Proposition A and how a community will come together and reach deep in order to be able to do infrastructure projects that will bring jobs and will change cities. I talk about climate change, the Paris Accords. I talk about power generation and helping with new jobs and alternate and renewable and sustainable energy sources. And I also use that as an opportunity to talk again about infrastructure and transportation, which is our next big climate change. I talk about racial injustice. I talk about poverty. Because as Dr. King said, there are no civil rights without economic justice. I talk about housing, both affordable housing and permanent supportive housing, and the need to turn back on the funding for that in housing and urban development. I talk about homelessness and the need for the support that we need here locally, mental health support. Talk about jobs and job programs, upskilling people, taking them out of poverty and into middle skill jobs, which is what we're trying to do right now with Workforce Solutions in our city and the Austin Community College, ACC. talk about the need to help with childcare for families so that they can take advantage of the opportunities to upskill. Talk about systemic racism, talk about policing and public safety, and just the need for us to find new and better ways to make our communities even safer. While we're talking about stuff happening at the national level, I want you to know also that last night I sent a letter to the administrator at the General Services Administration in Washington, D.C., demanding that she ascertain that President-elect Biden was the apparent successful winner of the election. That finding by the administrator of the GSA is what is necessary to turn on the money and the processes so that the new administration can start to go through the transition. As I pointed out in the letter, even if in incredibly far-fetched place right now that President-elect Biden is not sworn in as president, that still does not, even if that were true and were going to happen, that does not relieve the administrator of her obligation to find at this point that President-elect Biden is the, quote, apparent successful winner of the election so that things could get turned on. As I was coming on to Got a Minute Tonight, I got word that the administrator has gone ahead and made that ascertainment decision, which means, geez, now I wish I had just sent that letter a week ago. I'm going to conclude talking about Thanksgiving. Again, time to make new traditions. If you can, best to spend this time with the folks that you live with. Not only are we saying that here, but the CDC is saying that nationally. Not the holiday this year to take chances with our grandparents, with folks that are older. Not the time to take risks that are going to potentially impact, holidays well into the future. On this one, Zoom. Make some new traditions, have some virtual meals with other people by Zooming. If you want to make that old family recipe and get it to family and friends, make it, and then leave it outside where they can pick it up or deliver it to them and leave it on their front stoop. Don't forget about doing a potential virtual movie night. You can share movies with one another if you're all watching it at the same time. Virtual game nights. There's just lots of things you can do in creating new traditions, and you can always do that piñata tradition with the kids, just because there is no holiday where piñata doesn't make sense. With that, it's a new week. Everybody needs to take care and be safe as we go into the holidays. Good night.